My name is Alan, and welcome back to the Sound Speeds Podcast, Episode 3. Now, fall is now upon us. It is the first Saturday of fall, as a matter of fact. Halloween is just around the corner, and the haunted houses know it. They are opening this weekend nationwide. Make sure you take advantage of it because it's nice to get that adrenaline flowing, especially as the temperatures are starting to drop. Right now, it's still a little bit on the hot side for me. I prefer to be indoors in times like this. But that's not going to stop me from doing what I should be calling the Wide Awake Podcast, because you'll see. Let's get into it. Amazon impulse buys. Anyone that works in the film industry or knows anyone that does will tell you all about the long hours we work. It is extremely exhausting working 12-hour days every single day for 5 days a week, as it is normally scheduled by the film industry, and we typically will run a little bit long. Now, if you're working on a movie, particularly one that's out of town, then sometimes they'll get in one particular location. They'll say, well, we're only going to be here one night. We got to move, so we're going to go ahead and shoot until we finish all of our work here. That could take it extra time. Long hours are very common in the film industry, sometimes going long hours. Like, for example, a Tyler Perry movie that I turned down the last day on a few years ago, shot an entire movie in 6 days. And on the last day, it was 22 hours long. That is, again, a day I'm glad I turned down. Now, there are some productions companies out there, like, for example, Warner Brothers Television, that will refuse to let you go over 13 hours total work per day. I don't know if it's for safety reasons or if it's for financial or a combination of both, but they do that. And there are many companies with rules out there now because set safety is something that we take very, very seriously and have been fighting for a long time. And it's just now starting to get to be a lot safer on set. Remember Sarah Jones. Now, the reason I am pointing out all of this about our hours is because there are some times that I work overnights or I work extremely long hours, and then I'll stay up late and do something on sound speeds. Like, for example, I just got there working a 13-hour day today. I came home, took a shower, got ready, and I'm recording sound speeds instead of sleeping, which my wife does not like, but here we are. Now, I can get very, very tired, but I have to keep going. And instead of just relying on the coffee maker, which I do not actually drink coffee, I will do other things. For example, one of the things that I've found that I really do like is this right here. This is an essential oils diffuser for your car. It sits in your car, one of your drink seats right there. You simply plug it in to the USB adapter on your car, or you can get one of those adapters that plugs into the cigarette lighter, and then it simply plugs in here. Now, it is one where it has a maximum line fill right there. You can simply open this thing up, fill it up with water, and I usually will grab one of these from work. This is a local brand, which is just, it tastes wonderful. And you fill it up right there and then give it a few, it says, drops of an essential oil, like, for example, peppermint, which naturally keeps you wide awake, if it's working correctly, and you work correctly, I should say. But there is a point where you get overly tired and nothing is going to really work. And at that point, you obviously need to pull over and sleep. But if you just need a little bit of a pick-me-up in the sense of something like an essential oil, then definitely consider something like this little essential oil distiller for your car. You put a few drops of peppermint oil, for example, into this, and it starts diffusing in the car. I put I make sure that the light isn't going to distract me, obviously, and it sits there and diffuses right up next to me. And because it is peppermint, it keeps me alert. Now, do not do this on your drive-in the morning if you do like me and you take a nap in your car once you arrive. Despite the fact that you may be tired, if you do that, you're going to be wide awake, and that can be very difficult for you to take. You can't really take your nap in your car when you are wide awake, can you? There's a link in the description if you'd like to check this out, along with a link to some of the essential oils that I use. For example, peppermint not only keeps you wide awake, but it keeps the spiders away. And clary sage is great for relaxation. Something sound. On Monday, I released a video called Cheapest on Amazon, where I went to Amazon and I did a search for the cheapest microphone I could buy, which was this Pile Pro PD-MIK1. And then I wanted to get that sound into my computer, so I bought the cheapest USB audio interface adapter I could find, which did not interface well with the cable that came with the Pile. So I had to buy an adapter to bridge the gap between them. Now, my results were kind of interesting. And one of the biggest questions that I got in comments and in my email was, how much do you think that was the adapter and how much do you think was the microphone? I agreed to investigate that in the Something Sounds segment, so I figured we would do just that. So here I am with the microphone. It is plugged directly into the adapter and then plugged into the front of my computer even as we speak. So I'm going to hit record in the DAW on my computer, which is Audacity. So we are currently hearing the sound as it is coming into my computer. Now, just to give you an idea, there is a delay that I'm listening to, and I will go ahead and bring up both the delay. You're going to hear the delay, but if I bring up both of these microphones at the same time, you're going to hear how they delay against each other. And that is simply because the microphone and going into the computer does not have zero latency monitoring. And that's not a fun thing to have to deal with because there is that delay and it can be distracting to a lot of people. It's actually a speech jamming technique that you can look up online. But that's not very fun to listen to. So what I'm going to do is basically kill in my ears the way this thing sounds, and you're only listening to the microphone out of this Pile Pro now anyway. So I'm now giving you an idea of how it sounds when I've recorded on my computer. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to unplug it from my computer because it's pretty obvious now that this thing is complete junk when it goes into my computer. Now, this is the adapter. This is everything that came with that Pile Pro microphone. But in all honesty, how can we find out if it was the microphone or the USB interface? I mean, obviously, it would lead you to believe it was the microphone. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug this into my Sound Devices Mix Pre 6, which is how I monitor this channel's audio. And now you are listening to it directly from this microphone right there, the Pile Pro. And there's no background noise. So that leads me to believe that this adapter here was a piece of junk. What do you expect? It's $2 and some odd cents. So this is the way that the Pile Pro sounds if you just go straight into the thing with no adapter or anything that's going to be goofing it all up. And in all honesty, it's kind of cool to hear the way this microphone actually sounds because there's not much information about it online. And it is very, very cheap indeed. This windscreen, to give you an idea, there's nothing to it. I mean, you can see through the thing. I don't know if you can see through it, but I can definitely see through it. All this does is it just breaks up the wind ever so slightly, and there's no point to it at all. So this will at least give us an ironclad test and proof positive that I don't even know what I'm doing here with this thing. I should just let it be. Toss this thing in the trash. Okay, so here it is one more time for your listening pleasure. This microphone is actually not producing a whole lot of noise in the line. It was all this adapter. So at least we've gotten down to the bottom of it, so you now can sleep. Opinionated Much. One of the big pet peeves I have is people that overuse visual effects and CGI when they can use practical effects. I did 2 seasons of Walking Dead, or rather about 1.5 seasons. And that's not including all the day playing and extra time that I spent up there, like ever since the very beginning, Walking Dead season 1. But one of the things that always impressed me about Walking Dead, and one of the reasons I believe it was very, very popular, was because of the practical effects. It looks very real. The reason why practical effects look real is because they are real. It doesn't matter that it could be a cheap looking crazy prosthetic thing that you wear on your face. It doesn't matter even if it looks fake because there's a weird bulge someplace when you watch a movie or a TV show. It doesn't matter. The fact of the matter is, it's an appliance the actors are wearing. And because of that, it exists in the real world and you naturally see it and your brain makes the connection that it is real. When you look at CGI, it is a computer rendition of something. It does not have weight. It does not flow the same way anything else does in the real world, which is one of the reasons why Terminator 2 Judgment Day was such a groundbreaking effects-wise movie in 1982. I'm sorry, 92. It was brilliant the way they made that look. But then, because he was a police officer, the T-1000 was a police officer, and everything on his uniform was always crystal, perfectly looking crisp, collars and everything. there wasn't a whole lot that had to move and flow. It's not like animating a woman where her hair would flow in the wind, or animating a creature that does not exist like they did in the Star Wars movies a few years later, the prequels. But if you look back at those Star Wars prequels, they are not anything visually that stands the test of time, because by the time you were done rendering those visual effects that you have spent a couple of years developing, technology has already moved past it. And as much as visual effects artists are trying to stay on the cutting edge and make things look real, the fact of the matter is there is still a lack of full belief in visual effects most of the time, because the little bitty things are not, they don't really just feel in nature. Now, I think that Shiva looked great on Walking Dead. I do think that there are movies out there that make visual effects look very real. But at the same time, in The Hobbit, compare that to Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings, where you had the Uruk-hais, those creatures had real appliances on their face. They looked freaky, even though when they yelled and when they spoke, they looked like their mouths were stuck together because of the appliances on the actors. You can only do so much, but that kind of made it more scary because it was still real. You accept it because it is real. When you look at CGI and it doesn't feel real, you disbelieve it. And unfortunately, sorry, Peter Jackson, The Hobbit looked like garbage. That white, albino or pale, or whatever you want to call it, orc that you decided to make looked so bad. Gollum looked good. He was a lot of fun to watch. But then Gollum, also we were going to compare him to Lord of the Rings, but then that was motion capture. Andy Serkis doing his magic, then a computer kind of enhancing that, making him look and sound real because he was a real actor doing it. It was just motion capture. It wasn't like Polar Express was a few years before that, like 10 years before that. It was not, because it was, first of all, animated differently. And second of all, the technology had gone quite a bit past it. I spoke to the people that worked on sound on Polar Express, and when they did the motion capture for that, all of their microphones, for example, and their booms and everything had to be black, and there could not be any little bitty white particles on that, otherwise it would throw off the machine. By the time it got into the special effects for The Hobbit, it wasn't an issue anymore. As a matter of fact, I worked on Avengers Infinity War in the mocap unit, and in the motion capture suite, I could literally be everywhere. The guy that was operating the camera, it was not actually a camera, it was a viewfinder. They had multiple cameras up all around, and as the actors were performing, they would walk around the actors and pretend to hold a camera in their hands, but what they were doing is manipulating the perspective of the viewer as you would watch the movie. Now, they could obviously change it however they wanted to later, if they wanted to manually change the angle and whatever in post, because that was simply just a representation for the directors to see what it was. But I could literally be anywhere I wanted to be. I had the microphone right on top of the actors, literally right there, and it was not any kind of an issue. Even when the operators told me I could stand perfectly still and they did a tracking shot straight through me. The actor was where you're looking at me, and I was right here with my microphone over, and a camera guy goes behind me holding this little thing. I'm like, he's going to complain, or there's going to be an issue. There wasn't one. Motion capture is that good now, but computers are still not able to fully give a feeling, even in the most realistic looking circumstances, that it is 100% real, especially because modern budgets are not able to keep it that high a quality, and that it just is not quite there yet. But practical effects are 100% believable, even if they look cheesy or cheap, simply because they are based on reality. Sure, you may have a weird appliance on somebody in a horror movie that, they have a weird chop in their face and their face looks really, really fake, and there's this weird thing that bulges out, but it still looks real, simply because it is an appliance on the actor's face. It's not CGI. Try taking the same budget and putting a CGI, blemish on someone's face, or do it practical, and you're going to find better results with the practical effect. I'm not saying that CGI is all garbage. I know a lot of people that do computer-generated effects, and if you're watching this, I'm not simply poking at CGI. I think the things that you guys are able to do is complete wizardry. But I still don't think that we should abandon practical effects because, in my opinion, opinionated much, it is still favored by the audience because it looks real. Wrong answers only. Ever since I started Sound Speeds, people have been asking me, how do you train your hearing? You want to hear better, don't you? You want to be able to hear all those little bitty sounds that you're going to be listening for and hearing in the edit. You want to be able to get those out of your recording before you record them. You want to be able to hear noises on set when it's noisy and be able to deal with that. Well, I'm going to be showing you the way that us pros train our hearing. Now, the first one is something called shock, or rather extreme exposure. And let me put it in perspective for you. If you want to quickly get acclimated to the temperature in a swimming pool, what do? Slowly lower yourself in one step at a time and then sit there for a second? No. What you do is you dive straight in, getting yourself completely immersed in the water. Sure, it's going to be a shock to the system if the water is cold, but only 10 seconds later and you're going to be used to that water, right? The same thing works with your hearing. If you want to train your hearing to hear, for example, a 1K tone and to be able to identify what that 1K tone sounds like, bring up a 1K tone and blast it in your ears. If you do it for a good 30, 45 minutes, maybe even an hour, you're going to know how that sounds. As a matter of fact, you're going to not want to hear that sound anymore because you're going to be so trained to that sound that you don't need any further training to it. Now, that is just one method. Another one is if you look at waveforms in real time. So as you're recording your podcast, if you're sitting there staring at your screen, watching the waveforms, as they go in real time. You don't want to have a delay on this. You want to watch it in real time. And what happens is, just like when you train yourself in a language, and you know how some people will actually train themselves regarding Braille, and they understand how binary works and they can read it. The same thing works with your sound waves. If you look at the waveform monitor as it is progressing while you do your recording, you're going to be able to mentally process how things sound, and you're going to be able to shape your sound, accordingly. But that's a side note. What you're also going to be doing is looking at the sounds as you are listening to them. And because of that, you're subconsciously training your brain to the way those look. And because it's a waveform, your brain knows that that is something that you need to learn. So it magically just happens. I'm not a scientist, otherwise I could explain it better. But the long and the short of it is, the sound waves that you watch in real time are simply played back in your mind along with your voice, and you are putting two and two together, and it's immersive the same way foreign languages are when you study them in school and people speak those languages from the get-go. You slowly start to acclimate yourself to those. Now, if you can do it with a spectrograph, and and as weird as that may sound, it's a different type of experience, but you can even get more deep in your ear training, because a spectrograph will show you in two dimensions rather, the sound as you progresses through time and in the frequency. And if you simply look at those little lines and you study those, then you can actually do the same exact thing. It takes a little bit longer, to be honest, than the waveforms do, but you're going to be able to study those, and it's going to help you to be trained to have a better ear for listening to those kind of things. There's one last thing that you should also know, and that is that gray noise is something that, if you were to listen to it, gray noise basically compensates for the weighting curve of your ear. So you don't hear your lows and your highs as well as you hear the middle frequencies. And what gray noise is it basically levels out everything in your ears by boosting the lows and highs, and it drops the noises in the middle that you can hear better, so that way every sound sounds about the same volume. If you use gray noise and set up a real-time gray noise generator, not a gray noise, but you equalize your headphones, for example, if you do monitoring through headphones, or your speaker system in your studio, if you set an EQ curve that matches gray noise, then what you're actually doing is you're making it where you hear every single frequency at the exact same volume. And because of that, you make your mixes better. It's going to make everything better overall. So those are a few things that us pros do. And I highly recommend that you just dive straight in, because obviously you want to have a very well-trained ear if you're going to be working in sound. even as a hobby. Storytime. This story goes back quite a few years, back to when my oldest daughter, who is now a teenager, was only 15 months old. She, my wife, and me and a few of our close friends went to the UK on a vacation for a month. And one of the people that joined us was my wife's sister, who we're going to call Angie in this video. Now, Angie had just graduated a university in Washington, and she had been working, so she had some savings and was looking forward to actually spending that in the UK with us. Now, Angie was very adamant about paying her way, but she didn't mind receiving her graduation gift. And so one of the times that we were out and about, my wife, who's great at finding deals, found this really small bed and breakfast right outside of Stratford-upon-Avon. And this little tiny place was on a farm. You went down a bunch of dirt roads in order to get there, and it was just lovely out there. There were farms, and basically in the UK, if you want to explore, you're free to roam. But if you walk through a gate that you had to open, the rule is close it behind you and feel free to walk around. If the gate was open when you walk through it, leave it open. That's basically the rule. So here we were in Stratford-upon-Avon at this little bitty bed and breakfast, and they had sheep. They had all kinds of just not wild animals, but they were, animals that you would keep in a farm in the UK all over the place. Cornish hens, lambs, sheep. They had horses, cows, you name it, they had it. And it was just lovely out there. Beautiful. When it went dark, which was like at 2:00 in the morning because we were there in the summer, it was beautiful in the sky. But when it wasn't, it was nice and cool to the skin the entire time. Love that kind of a temperature. Now, the reason I'm kind of setting this up for you is because we were going to be staying there one night. And we didn't really want to leave and have to go back to town and find dinner. And so when we were trying to find out what options there were for dinner, my wife did ask if it was possible to eat there. And the lady said, since we asked in advance, she said, sure, I can, accommodate you, no problem. So when we got there, we checked in. We had about my 15-month-old daughter, who was, by that point, she was hungry. It was like 6:00 p.m. We go in there and we say, what would you, and the lady brings us out some salads and some bread and stuff like that, and asks us what would we like for dinner. Well, I'm a carnivore. So I said, do you have steak? And she's like, absolutely. And my wife said, do you have something like a Cornish hen? She said, yeah, sure, no problem. And then Angie said, how about, do you have lamb chops or something like that? And she said, yeah, we can easily accommodate you. No problem at all. So she disappeared into the kitchen, and we were just having a blast in there talking in this very old, very nice old building, quaint. It was quiet. You could see out the windows. You can see nature. It was beautiful. And then after a while, my daughter, who was very hungry and starting to get very bored in there, since there wasn't a whole lot going on. This is before you had handheld cellular devices and stuff providing amusement to you. We were basically there trying to make do with this little DVD player that did not have a very good battery in there, and it was just dying all over the place. Couldn't plug it up into the wall because we didn't have the right kind of charger with us. It was crazy. So anyway, my wife and daughter and Angie and me were all trying to just wait this out. About an hour and 15 minutes into the wait, we are just at wit's end trying to keep my daughter calm because she is over it. She's tired. She's not, she's not wanting to deal with this anymore. She's hungry. All she wants to do at this point is settle down and go to bed, take a bath and go to bed. Now, here we were, unable to get the lady who runs the bed and breakfast to stop for a second and come and talk to us. I even left the room and tried looking around for her. I couldn't find her. And after about an hour and 15 minutes, she came in to check on us. And my wife says, it's been a while. We're just curious as to how much longer it's going to be. And she said, oh, no, not very long at all. We're cooking now. We're like, okay, whatever. This is taking forever, but that's fine. We're just going to deal with this. And so we do. Now, it was probably about an hour and 45 minutes after we got there and, sat down and she took our order that the food finally came out. My daughter was losing it. Me, Angie, and my wife were just going completely nuts too, but trying to be nice and calming and whatever. The lady comes out and It smells wonderful. It looks great. I have a nice huge stick. It was juicy and just wonderful. And my wife and Angie were also very, very happy. Now, my wife, of course, says, "Can I ask you what took so long?" And the lady replies, just matter of factly, "Oh, well, we had to slaughter the animals." Well, I was kind of like, "Oh, what?" And my wife and Angie were just kind of, their faces kind of sank, their eyes got big, their mouths dropped, and they just looked down at their food because they realized right there that those animals were being slaughtered while we were inside dealing with my daughter and her 15-month-old toddlerisms, not wanting to let her loose to destroy anything in this very, very old house. But there it was. They actually told me that they didn't have to kill the animal that I ate. They had killed that the day before. But as for the other two, the Cornish hen and the lamb, yeah, those were slaughtered and put on the table so that my wife and Angie could have a nice dinner. And they both said it was wonderful. It was great. It was the best they've ever had. So at least there's that. But that was my story, and I'm sticking to it. Floating. Last year, I released a video on how to make Gollum juice to help you with throat soothing. If you're an opera singer, if you're a podcaster, if you use your voice for a living, what have you. It's something that really comes in handy. And if you've not watched that video, definitely check it out because it is full of awesome information with a very simple recipe that can be used to help you repair your voice if it has been strained. Now, I mentioned before that I try to stay awake and I don't normally resort to caffeine, but that's in the form of Coca-Colas and coffee and that kind of stuff. But I do love me some ZipFizz. ZipFizz is natural, it has no sugar, it has B12, and it also has electrolytes in there. But it also, if you look over here at the ingredients, it has a blend of different kinds of plant extracts, green tea leaf extract, alpha lipoic, I can barely see it, lipoic acid, green coffee bean extract, grape seed extract, grape skin extract. Anyway, it's got 205 milligrams of caffeine in this little bitty tube right here. Now, most of the time, if I'm on set, I see people doing what you would normally do with something like a tube of ZipFizz and pouring it into a 16.9 fluid ounce bottle, which is what, 500 milliliters, 500 or half a liter. Yeah, 500 milliliters. So normally you would stick a ZipFizz like this into this bottle. But me, I am not normal. And one of the things I'll do is I'll pop these open and have a little bit of it just like that. But then one of the things I'm also known for is not wasting time. So if I want to get the ZipFizz in my system because I'm starting to drag a little bit, I will do exactly what you're about to watch me do right here. Mm-hmm. Sorry about the mouth noise. ZipFizz is wonderful. I'm going to be up all night now. But kind of like with the cinnamon challenge, very fine powder. You want to down it and don't open your mouth once you put the entire ZipFizz in. The reason why is, excuse me there, I made a mistake. It's still foaming up in my mouth. I made the mistake of putting some of the ZipFizz powder in the bottom part of my lips, so it's now foaming up like crazy. ZipFizz is a lot more foamy than Emergency, if you're familiar with that. It's just foaming up like crazy all over the place. It's driving me crazy. But ZipFizz is wonderful because it gives you a nice energy boost. And because of that, and because it's natural with no sugar, you don't have that crash that normally comes from a sugar crash. Now, one of the things that I had been playing with and got very bored during a stunt sequence a couple of days ago. So I decided to look up a recipe for ZipFizz Gummies. And so I found a very simple recipe and I decided to make it because I have received those questions about, have you any knowledge on anything else that you know how to make? Well, I've been experimenting, and so I figured it was now a good time to share with you my journey in making ZipFizz Gummies. Look at them, the tubes.
Yummy tubes.
Yes, my 3-year-old was indeed supervising me this time, so why don't we start off by measuring out half a cup of water. Put it inside. And I go pop. Then I emptied 6 tubes of ZipFizz into that water.
Orange.
That's right, these are going to be orange flavored.
Here's some orange.
Because of the fizzy nature of ZipFizz, I should have added 1 tube, let it settle. Add another tube, let it settle, and so forth. But
Watch
no,
out.
I didn't do that.
It's spilling.
Oh my gosh.
Some supervisor she is. She wanted a bigger mess.
Now let's do purple.
Purple? I failed at the orange.
Yummy. Tasty orange.
At least the flavor met with her approval, even though she doesn't need anything to give her any more energy.
Do you have some?
Well, it's not really something that's ready just yet.
You might think that the ZipFizz raises the water level, but surprisingly, it doesn't once you stir it in and it settles down.
Heavy cream.
I think you're supposed to use the heavy whipping cream out of a tub, but this is what I have available, so shaving foam it is.
Just it in the cream.
It's not recommended that you use a fork, a whisk, or any kind of electronic device to mix this up. The reason why is because it aerates too much. You want it to stay relatively flat and liquid-like. Unlike Jell-O, this brand of unflavored gelatin came with little packages on the inside, so I used 2 of the 4 and stirred it in evenly. I'm sure you've noticed by now that I've transferred everything into this frying pan, and for good reason. Once it's kind of mixed up just a little bit, I'm going to put on low heat and stir until it evenly mixes all the way down. You don't want to turn up the heat too high because if it boils, then it's going to be adding air into the mix, and that's going to take away from the smooth consistency of the gummy once it's set. To make the pouring process easier, I empty the frying pan into the measuring cup, and then use the measuring cup to fill up the candy molds. My goal was to make 12 gummies, and although I did measure the amount of liquid that could fit inside of the candy molds, I lost quite a bit of it when the ZipFizz overflowed. Keep in mind that when you remove it from the refrigerator, it's going to be a little on the sticky side due to the condensation, so you're going to want to let it sit out for a bit in order to dehydrate and kind of harden up a bit. Before I show my ZipFizz gummy, let me explain one thing. Normally when I'm at work, I'm drinking water constantly, sipping on it while I'm at work. And so my mouth is usually pretty lubricated and I'm able to just constantly down a ZipFizz if I want to. But it was a little bit more difficult for me to do it this time because it was about 3.5 or 4 hours ago that I left set. And because that's when I left set, that's when I stopped drinking water. I don't normally drink water while I'm at home, more than just taking a few pills or something, I'll take as I'm going to bed, ibuprofen, whatever. But because of that, my throat was pretty dry, to be completely honest with you. And also because I've been speaking nonstop for this podcast, it was extra fun for me downing that ZipFizz. Now, let me go ahead and get into it. You noticed that those gummies were orange. I took those to work with me and they did not last very long. They went over extremely well and they were in high demand. So I ended up making another batch. And in this batch, I made it with purple ZipFizz. Now, another little modification I did to it was, which I realized was a mistake, was I used only 1 pack of the gelatin. And I really do think that you need to use 2 packs of the gelatin when you do it. Another thing I did for this particular recipe, as opposed to the one that you saw me do, is instead of starting with half a cup of water, I did just right at 2/3, or rather 3/4 of a cup of water, but in the future I'm going to use 2/3 because when I added everything in there and put it in my candy molds, it ended up producing slightly more liquid than I wanted to. And I actually poured it so full it was like, bulging up. But this here is a finished product where I used 3 ZipFizz and 3/4 of a cup of water, quite a bit of heavy whipping cream. And this is probably, as opposed to the other ones, which by the time, it frothed up and basically screwed up the entire recipe by spilling a whole bunch of the ZipFizz, it probably went from maybe 6 tubes down to, let's call it 4.5 to be easy, because I made 9 gummies out of it. So that takes 200 and basically reduces it to about 100 milligrams of caffeine per little gummy. Strong flavor too. But these right here, I made 12 of these using 3 packs of ZipFizz. So this is about 600 milligrams. About 600 milligrams. Wait a minute. That was not correct math before, was it? That's closer to 150. Yeah, about 150 milligrams, because 250 times 4.5 would be 900. Divide that by 9. No, that's 100. Okay, I'm second guessing myself for no reason. So 3 bottles of ZipFizz and making 12 little gummies out of it. Now each one of these are 50 milligrams. And I'm going to try it right now to see how it tastes. Again, downing a ZipFizz and now downing this thing, I now have, oh glorious, I now have 250 plus milligrams of caffeine in my system, and it is currently 3:28 a.m. So I can just be expecting to be up all night. That's going to be totally awesome. I think the flavor is good. Personally, I like stronger flavors, which is the reason why I like to take the bottle straight. But a lot of people think that that's a little bit too much. So I will let you know, if you're interested, in the comments below what people think about it, at work, because I'm going to be taking this batch in with, tomorrow to share with them, and we'll get an idea of what they think of it for, future. And I can write it in the comments below as well. I think that it was a little loose in how it was held together, and one more pack of the unflavored gelatin would probably help it to stay together a little bit better. But there you have it. ZipFizz Gummies. They are a great thing. So there you have it, the Wide Awake SoundSpeeds Podcast Episode 3. Now, if you have any questions or would like to make a suggestion for one of the segments, please send me an email to soundspeedspodcast@yahoo.com. I would love to get your email and your suggestions. Now, I do look at all the comments below, but I do not take those and submit that and use those for a future podcast. It just does not work with my workflow. So if you would like to submit something for a future podcast, please send me an email. I'd really appreciate it. It will help me to figure out everything. And it also goes with the outro of the show as well. Speaking of that, the outro to this episode is provided by Alex B using an Electro Voice RE20. Take it away, Alex.
If you'd like to ask a question for the Wrong Answers Only segment or submit a suggestion for the floating segment, send an email to soundspeedspodcast@yahoo.com. If you'd like to showcase your voiceover talent by saying this outro, make sure it sounds good, doesn't exceed 20 seconds, and send it to the same email. Hit subscribe for more content both here and on SoundSpeeds.